Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Golden State Report podcast, the place for conversation about LA and California that is meant to make you aware, not angry. I'm your host today, Mariel Garza. Before we get to our talk and to our guests, if you're with us on YouTube, please hit the like button below and remember to subscribe to our channel. Both of those things help us win the YouTube algorithm lottery, so please do that. With me today is an esteemed veteran journalist of Los Angeles. If you are a Los Angeles City Hall insider, you will know Jon Regardie, who has contributed to dozens of local and national publications, including Los Angeles Downtown News, which he served as editor for many years. Los Angeles Magazine, Blueprint Magazine, West Side Current, The East Sider, and now Golden State. He's done some great stuff for us in the last few months of our existence. One of the pieces he's written for us, we posted this week on the surprising reality that money doesn't always buy you a political seat in Los Angeles or in California. And for this story, Jon, you mined data, publicly available data, campaign databases, and put together just a really awesome piece that was a bit surprising to me, even somebody who's been paying a lot of attention. Just give us the takeaway.
Absolutely. And Mariel, thank you for having me on here. And thank you for that very, very kind introduction and for allowing me to be part of Golden State Report. Really enjoying it, having a great reaction. And yes, as you just referenced, we certainly all have, of us who've been following elections, we always think of the adage, oh yeah, money is the lifeblood of electoral politics. And that's why people are raising so much money. But in a surprising number of instances in Los Angeles and throughout California, the person with the biggest war chest does not win. I know we'll get into it, but I'll just focus right now on the city of Los Angeles, the 2022 election. There were 11 items on the ballot, 3 citywide posts and 8 city council seats. In that election, 5 of the people who spent more money won, but 6 elections were won by the person who spent less money. Now, literally 6 of them, the highlight being Rick Caruso spending $109 million, losing to Karen Bass in the mayor's race, who spent just under $10 million. But that was really just one of 6. And we've seen that throughout the years, in Los Angeles, since then, before then, and even some statewide races as well.
So you and I have been around for, well, let's just say a while, watching
A while.
city politics. And up until a few cycles ago, it was nigh impossible to unseat an incumbent in the city. You were an incumbent or you were the heir apparent. In some council races, it was, the chief of staff for the council member, and then that person's chief of staff who would take over a council seat. And it was really hard to challenge the establishment. Something changed, and I think that seems to dovetail with the issue of money. Do you have any thoughts on what happened?
Absolutely. And just to add to what you're saying, that time period, 17 years. It was 2003 when a city council member was upended. And then it did not happen again until 2020. Now, what happened in 2020 is we started to see the emergence in Los Angeles of what some people call progressives, super progressives, left-leaning, et cetera, et cetera. But generally, it's been a new wave of candidates. And the person we're talking about in 2020 was Nithya Raman. She had moved into Silver Lake. She'd been in Los Angeles for about 7 or 8 years, wanted to run for city council and wanted to challenge an incumbent named David Ryu. Ryu had won 4 years ago. In that election, for the primary, David Ryu would end up spending about $1.2 million. Nithya Raman spent about $400,000, but she had an immense ground level backing. She really connected with community members. I did an interview with her after the primary. She had 600 volunteers who she told me knocked on 83,000 doors. In that primary, David Ryu got 44%, Nithya Raman got 41%. But as they went towards the then general election, the money started rolling towards Nithya Raman. She won that race. And since then, we have seen 3 other city council incumbents upended, and they've all followed that same platform with this sort of left-leaning progressive balance, tapping this really energized base of often young Angelenos, voters, renters who may be people who hadn't voted that frequently, if at all, in the past.
Was this the social media factor? Because that does seem technology seems to be the big difference and has definitely allowed people to organize in ways that just were unavailable to anybody 20 years ago.
Absolutely, social media is a part of it, but it's not the extent of it. I mean, what you'll actually see, it starts on social media, but then it migrates to in-person activities. We just referenced those 600 volunteers. Those were people going out and knocking on doors. So it starts on that, but then there will be these big community meetings. And again, some of these, organizations who've helped Nithya Raman and others, such as Ulysses Hernandez, Hugo Soto Martinez, Isabel Gerardo, in 2024, they really you get these groups together and people get energized and they feel that they can make a difference, particularly when you're running against, establishment candidates who in many cases have been flawed.
You also make the case and point out that there's a similar thing happening on the statewide level, whereas, and this has been going back a while, at least 30 years, where the candidate with the most money doesn't always win, and sometimes they have a lot of money. I think this is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is sort of a different dynamic because what those races also have is a conservative person with more money than the Democrat. And this has been a state that has been slowly transforming to blue. Do you see any sort of simil- similar or common ground in the money question in Los Angeles and when it comes to statewide races?
Would say that, and you're absolutely right in the differences, and we're talking about things such as, Al Ketchy back in 1996 spending $40 million, but losing to Gray Davis, or in 2010 when Meg Whitman, running as a Republican, the former eBay chair, dropped 177 million, lost to Jerry Brown, who spent 36 million. So absolutely these huge aberrations. And so yes, you are correct in that there's a difference between often like a Republican or more conservative candidate, but voters ultimately have been able to see through this avalanche of cash and just determine, they weren't swayed by the money. They were swayed by the person who they ultimately believed would be better for them. So that has held the same, whether on this statewide level or on this city of Los Angeles level.
Can having a lot of money in your campaign, actually annoy people? Turn voters off?
That's a question that we might ask Meg Whitman or Rick Caruso. Not to be too facetious there, but look, particularly in the case of Rick Caruso, as we referenced, ran for mayor back in 2022. I did an analysis for Crosstown when I was doing some pieces, the data-driven website out of USC, and I determined that Rick Caruso spent over $50 million just on local television ads. And if we remember that contest, there were just ads, Rick Caruso commercials all the time, sometimes pro him, sometimes attacking Karen Bass. And that may have over time led to a sort of saturation and an oversaturation. Some people may have just become tired of Rick Caruso. Now, the other side of it was Rick Caruso in Los Angeles had at one time been a Republican, had been declined to state before, announcing that he was joining the Democrat, registering as a Democrat, a few weeks before he launched his campaign. So, people don't like money. People also can see, and sometimes recognize what they view as opportunism, and that doesn't play well at the polls.
I think this is going to play out in 2026 and particularly in the governor's race because we have, oh my gosh, like ten prominent candidates, all of whom have access to a lot of money. The one with the most amount of money, at least as far as I know, is Tom Steyer, who is the billionaire in this race. So, do you think the person with the most amount of money is likely to come out and top in the primary in the governor's race?
That's the $1 million question. You had a really fun piece, on the governor's race a while ago and how wide open it is and thus how fun it is. Look, I certainly think that Tom Steyer, with all that money, provides himself an opportunity to make his name known up and down the state. I think where that cash becomes really interesting and really, really helpful is in some of the, smaller markets and even some of the more conservative markets throughout the state, because he can spend hundreds of millions of dollars and other candidates may have, five, maybe $10 million if they're lucky. So it certainly is going to help him. Will it be the difference maker? I don't know. I mean, you've written about this. You followed it more. You tell me. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, on if this gets Tom Steyer into the top two.
Well, my own take is that one of the counterbalancing factors to extreme wealth is celebrity, right? If you people know who you are, which is why I think, you know, early on at least, Katie Porter was the front runner because people remembered her from those, viral videos during the pandemic and later when she was lecturing CEOs and other executives with her famous whiteboard. And that translated into her feeling comfortable enough to running for US Senate, which she did not win, as we know, for a lot of different reasons. That's a whole other discussion that we could have. And that's my fancy segue into the question about the mayor's race, where you have an incumbent who has all the advantages of being an incumbent, Karen Bass. You have a wealthy challenger who also has a track record. He's not just a rich guy who wants a seat. He's a track record of being in public service, including serving as superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is, almost as ungovernable as the city of LA. And now you have this, reality TV star from the Palisades who has announced his candidacy for mayor. And, I don't even know what to think about that. Like, how does celebrity play into local elections? Maybe it's less so than state or national, but I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to really find out a whole new dynamic in this election cycle. What do you think?
Oh, and first off, what I would add is a name that you didn't mention in that list, even though we spoke about him before, which is Rick Caruso, who after dropping $109 million in 2022. And by the way, for that $109 million, he lost by 10%. He lost by 90,000 votes. So it ultimately wasn't close. And, I'm sure you, like me, heard people all the time speculating, saying, well, Rick Caruso's constantly polling. And I think we all believe that if his poll numbers indicated that he could win the mayor's race, he'd be in the mayor's race. But going back to your further point, certainly Rick Caruso had a element of celebrity in this context back then, and that did not get him over the hump. I would say, despite Spencer Pratt's YouTube antics within the city of LA, Karen Bass is probably a bigger celebrity. I think at this point she is going to be very hard to topple in this race. Really the big question I think for me is, can she squeak just over 50% within the June ballot? If she does, then she doesn't even need to worry about a runoff. Also, part of this election is there is a candidate running to her left, a Democratic Socialist of America candidate, and back in 2022, a candidate who took that TAC got about 7% of the vote. So, I think really for Karen Bass, it's partly about, I got to raise a bunch of money, although, and we'll see how she does in a couple of days. But part of it is, can she just squeak by enough to get to 50%? If she doesn't, then, it's a whole new world. Elections in June and elections in November can be entirely different things. We probably should avoid getting a little too far ahead of ourselves, at this point.
You noted that the campaign finance reports for 2025 are due later this week on January 31st. What do you expect to see?
It's going to be really interesting. We're talking about a 6-month reporting period, the last 6 months of the year when a few people really started jumping in. And I expect certainly Mayor Karen Bass, she won't have as much as she did before as some other mayoral candidates, but she'll do well. She'll probably be comfortably ahead. But I'm going to just focus in on two sort of almost deep cut races, if you don't mind, because I think these are going to be really interesting. One of them is Council District 11. Tracy Park, who won the race in 2022, is running for re-election, and she is running against, again, one of these DSA-funded candidates. I've already heard that Tracy Park has over $1.1 million that she's raised throughout this contest. The most I've ever seen anyone spend in a city council race in the last 20 years is 1.2 million. So she's at over 1.1 million with 5 months of fundraising to go. Her opponent had a couple $100,000 last time. Faiza Malik, she'll probably get more money, but we're going to see some high levels of cash pouring into that race, but it shows how seriously Tracy Park is taking this contest. The other one I want to go into just real quickly is the city controllers contest. This was really interesting. We referenced this in the story. In 2022, Kenneth Mejia, CPA, who had formerly run for Congress a few times as a Green Party member and lost, was running for city controller. He spent far less than Paul Koretz, who was deemed to be the front runner, but absolutely crushed Koretz between the two primary and general election. Kenneth Mejia had about $500,000 less. So he's running for re-election again. He's running against two people. I don't think his total is going to be huge, but of the two people who are running against him, one of them, Isidore Hall, a former state legislator, he actually filed his numbers early. Though Isidore Hall entered in September, he only has $38,000 raised. I was actually surprised at how little it was.
Yeah, that is not enough to run a citywide race. You could run a campaign in a little city, but not the city of LA.
Yeah,
That's
but yeah, a hamlet maybe. But the person who I'm actually
especially if you don't have a corgi as your running group.
exactly. But the person actually to watch in this is Zach Sokoloff, a former teacher who works for a real estate firm that manages studios and other assets. Zach Sokoloff has already announced that he has raised in donations over $300,000, and says that he has over $500,000 in cash on hand. So $300,000 raised, $500,000 cash on hand. I really want to dig into these numbers and see where this money is coming from. But that's actually going to make the city controllers contest really interesting. 3 people representing 3 different swaths of the city and politics. That's one where I'm going to be really diving into the numbers.
Not sure I would have ever heard anyone saying the city controller's race is going to be really interesting. I think most Angelenos probably don't even realize there is a city controller, but it just shows that we're the political wonks that we are.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as a really special kind of nerd. So hand raised.
All right, Jon, thank you so much for joining us today for the Golden State Report podcast. And I hope you'll join us again in the future. Thanks.
Absolutely, Mariel. Thank you so much for having me.